Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today it is part 2 of my Overwatch League 2021 post-May Melee power rankings. If you did not see part 1, in which I covered teams 20 through 11, you can find that linked in the description, as well as in the cards and in the end of this video. There's tons of places for you to find it, so if one of the teams that you're curious about is not in this video, that means they were in that first video. Check that out wherever you can find it most easily. So, before we jump in, let's just go through the same kind of disclaimers I give all the time. These are my opinions, of course, so you may agree, you may disagree. That's totally fine. Just understand that these are my opinions. These are how I see things. Will I be wrong? Probably, but it's all for fun anyway, so that's all that really matters. The other thing is I'm going to try to avoid talking about the upcoming hero pools. For me, it's kind of like a tiebreaker thing, right? If there are two teams that I was really confident about, that I had in kind of similar places, or I was kind of conflicting on where to put the teams, then I would look at stuff like hero pools and shrink the schedule for determining who I would put ahead. But not as much of an issue for this second part of the video. So, yeah. With that out of the way, let's jump in. Let's start with number 10 as we jump into the top half of my power rankings. At number 10, I have the LA Gladiators. Now, this is one that some people may disagree with because they were a 2-2 team. They looked pretty weak against the really good teams that they played, which, of course, were the San Francisco Shock and the Dallas Fuel. And then they got 2 3-0 wins against the Boston Uprising and the London Spitfire. But the reality is, right, we know that they are at a point where they are good enough to get wins against some of these lower-level teams. So they are not a bad team by any means. I think they struggled a lot early on. I think some of the problem that they had, or part of the problem that they had, were that they were being inconsistent with who they played. Right? We didn't see a ton of Moth. We were seeing a lot of Skewed. We weren't seeing a ton of Birdring and Kevster together. We were seeing a lot of just, mixing and matching with the DPS line. That second week they played, they seemed a lot more in control of what they were doing. They seemed to favor compositions that I think worked for them better. I think they favored their better lineup a little bit more, and so the LA Gladiators, to me, had a huge leap from week 1 to week 2. I think they will only continue to improve from here on out. So they proved themselves against teams that they should beat. They lost the teams that maybe they should not have lost to in our initial thought process. But to me, I think they're doing just fine. Maybe they're not as good as we originally thought they were, but right now I have them here at number 10. They're not a bad team by any means, but they definitely still have a little bit of room to grow before they're ready to be kind of where we initially thought they might be. At number 9, I have the Seoul Dynasty. This is a very interesting team. I think this is a team that has looked pretty good. They've looked, I would say, mostly consistent. There hasn't been a ton of concerns on my end, which was kind of, my biggest fear for this team was that they would look really inconsistent like they did last season. But I think a big part of the reason why that's not a problem is because 2U has been playing very well. They have that solid off-tank player. They feel much more confident in what they have on their roster, and I think that is part of the thing that's helping them out a lot. Prophet and Fitz are both playing really well this season. We haven't seen any Sabiolbi, but his kind of role is very specific on this team, so I'm not really that surprised. We've seen some Marvel and Gesture swapping, so all in all, I think this team has actually looked pretty solid. I think they are going to continue to improve over time. I don't think they're a team that's going to get to be one of the world beaters in the league, but I think they will improve over time. I think they will get better and better as the season progresses. The problem I think the Seoul Dynasty have is that they don't seem super comfortable on every composition. We know when they want to play Reinhardt, they're most likely going to play Marvel. That is something that we know for a fact. He probably also would play more on the Orisa, though Gesture's Orisa is also not too bad. So, it is a type of thing where without Reinhardt going forward, we can expect to see a lot of Gesture. How good are they going to look if they're basically running exclusively Gesture? We'll see. I think Gesture is a very good player. He's had his ups and downs at times, but I think for Seoul, he's been largely consistent. I think he's been performing much better since he's been on this Seoul roster, and so I'm really curious to see how this team continues going forward. To me, they've just kind of been good, not great, and that's really why I have them down here. They've not really inspired me with their play, but they have looked consistent, and they've looked solid, so I have them here at 9. At number 8, we have the Washington Justice, a very, very good team. They did not get to that immediate high-level peak that I think a lot of people expect them to get to, though, I think that really over time this is a team that will continue to improve. This is a team where a lot of the players on this team have not seen sustained success. Bebe, Closer. Yes, Closer was a champion with the London Spitfire, but he was kind of the weak link on that roster. I think a lot of people would look at him. He was benched for Nuss, and so, how much of that was really on Closer. Closer goes to Dallas, has a lot of difficulties there. Decay had a lot of success in contenders, but since he's been in the Overwatch League, he's been on some okay rosters, with the LA Gladiators. He's on a pretty weak roster with the Dallas Fuel. The only player on this team that has really kind of seen sustained success is Fury, right? Very, very good when he was with the London Spitfire, very good when he was at the Fusion last year. So this is a team that has a lot of growing to do. It's going to take some time for this team to really hit their stride, but I've been very impressed with Mag. He is still, for what it's worth, my lead candidate for Rookie of the Year. He has looked phenomenal. He has been a very good main tank. I mean, he outdueled Fearless in their series against the Dallas Fuel. So I've really been impressed with this Justice team. I think they are not perfect on every composition. They don't look as comfortable when they play those Reinhardt-based rush compositions and any Reinhardt-based composition in general. But obviously, rush is the most prominent of those. It's a big part of why I think they lost to Florida in the May Melee qualifiers. Just we're not looking as comfortable. And so I think the Justice really have some room to improve, but we know that when they are on that Winston composition, when they can play the heroes they are comfortable on, they really do look like they can beat just about anybody. I 100% expect this team to continue to be competing for those Hawaii appearances as the season progresses, so I have them here at number 8. At number 7, I have the Chengdu Hunters. Now, this is a team that I think really kind of got lucky in that they hit a meta that worked pretty well for them. It's early in the season. I think Chengdu tends to have kind of strong performances early in the season and then kind of hit a bit of a dip. That's been kind of a consistent theme. This is their best start by far, don't get me wrong. They've looked better to start the season than they have in seasons past, but they are a team that comes out in a way that really does throw a lot of teams off guard, and I think that helps them going forward. Obviously, they played the Seoul Dynasty in order to qualify for the May Melee, which I think was the benefit for them. They played the weaker of those APAC teams, but when they got to the actual May Melee tournament, they didn't look all that strong. They got beaten by the Florida Mayhem. They got beaten by the Dallas Fuel. Good teams, and arguably two of the top teams in the Overwatch League, but they never really looked like they had much together. They struggled against the Philadelphia Fusion, so we know they're a good team, but when they play teams that are considered better than them, they don't look all that great. So it's tough for me to really say they're any higher than this. There are teams who didn't make the tournament who I'm putting above them, and people may disagree with that, but from what I've seen, the Chengdu Hunters just haven't really had it all together, and they hit a meta that worked for them, they hit compositions that worked for them, and they kind of got a lucky break that got them as far as they were, so I don't think they were one of the top 2 teams in the APAC region. I just think they got lucky. They hit the break that worked for them, and they took advantage of where those opportunities came up. I need to see more out of this team. I want to see them compete more against the Shanghai Dragons, the Philadelphia Fusion, and even the Seoul Dynasty going forward, and the Hangzhou Spark, who I think are looking a lot more improved, to see where they stand. They're a good team. They're far better than they were in seasons past, but I'm still not quite ready to say they are a top-level team in the Overwatch League. At number 6, I have a pick that may be a little bit controversial to some. I have the Florida Mayhem. And I know some people may disagree with this because they, of course, made the May Melee. They were a top 4 team. They took the Shanghai Dragons to 5 maps. They beat the Chengdu Hunters. Why are they this low on the list? And to me, it comes down to 2 things. One, I think the fact that they made the May Melee really came down to they got the easier side of the bracket, right? They had to play a Toronto Defiant team, which had a super easy schedule, and they were not that good, right? Like, they were not one of the top teams in the May Melee qualifiers. They just got lucky and played an easy schedule. They played the Washington Justice, who were not as comfortable on the rush compositions, which is what Florida had favored. And it's what they wanted to run. It's what they wanted to force. And so when you're able to basically take two teams that are not as comfortable playing what you want to play, you can force that a lot more easily. Yes, they looked good against the Shanghai Dragons, but the second time they played Shanghai, it was a complete stomping. Shanghai was completely ready for them. They took that next step. They took that next level, and they kind of embarrassed the Florida Mayhem the second time they played. So to me, that was kind of a thing of the Mayhem had their opportunities in that first series. They let it slip away. They made mistakes. They had that bad grab on Gibraltar, and they kind of had opportunities that they could have won that series, and they let it slip away. And the Shanghai Dragons just did not let up. The Shanghai Dragons punished them the second time they played, and so as good as I think they are, I don't know how I feel about them playing the San Francisco Shock, because we did see them play the Shock. It was not pretty for the Mayhem. I don't know how I feel about them playing the Outlaws or the Dallas Fuel going forward, and so I have them here at 6. They're a good team. They've looked good, but I still have some concerns about them, and I don't know if I am ready yet to put them in that conversation of top 5 teams, just based on some of the weaknesses we've seen from them so far. At number 5, I have the San Francisco Shock. To me, there's a pretty big gap here between 5 and 6. The Shock are a team that I think have tons of talent. They look really good, and when they have things together, they still look like one of the best teams in the league. The problem is, I have a lot of concerns about some of the decisions that have been made for this team coaching-wise, as well as kind of just their mentality so far this season. I don't like Violet playing DPS. You have Glister on this roster, you have Striker on this roster. If you need a hit scan player, you have 2 players who have proven themselves to be top-level, elite hit scan talent. If Glister isn't very good, the fact that you picked him up says a lot. Even aside from those 2, you still have Tayo, who we've seen play McCree. So the reason that we have Violet playing McCree, to me, is just weird and strange, and I don't really like it. And you saw that they did not look prepared when they played the Dallas Fuel. They wanted their revenge against the Houston Outlaws. It seemed pretty clear. They didn't look great against the Atlanta Reign. They've struggled. They really have been struggling, I think, in the past couple of weeks. They've not looked as good this season, but they still have a ton of talent. They still are winning games that they should win. Even if they're close, they are still showing that they have that fight in them. But they're not the world beaters that we saw from them in the past. They're still a top 5 team. They're still going to beat the likes of the Florida Mayhem and the Washington Justice and the LA Gladiators. But they don't look like they are the top team in North America right now. I would argue they don't even look like they're a top 2 team in North America right now. So as much as I do think the San Francisco Shock are still a strong team, I still think they should be considered title favorites at this point in time. Right now, I don't think they are that top of the world Shock that we've seen in the past. And so for me, I have them here at number 5. Number 4, I have the Houston Outlaws. You know what? The Houston Outlaws are a really good team. Yeah, they lost to the Dallas Fuel, and it was a pretty one-sided affair. But the Dallas Fuel look really, really good, and they look like they're one of the best teams in the Overwatch League right now. But the Houston Outlaws beat every other team they played. They beat the San Francisco Shock. That's a big win. That's a good win. They also beat the Dallas Fuel when they met in Week 1. And so Houston has not played an opponent that they haven't beaten at least once in their matchups. I definitely have questions about how successful they'll be long term. They played the Dallas Fuel once and they managed to win. They played them a second time. It's a pretty one-sided affair. Is this going to be a similar situation to what we see with the Florida Mayhem, where they're a team that really, once you play a team once, you can kind of figure them out pretty easily? Houston Outlaws did talk about the Dallas Fuel being a tough team the first time they played them, so there is certainly some stuff to kind of go in Outlaws' favor that, it wasn't a fluke for them to do as well as they've done so far. They've looked really, really strong. They've played good opponents. They look disciplined. They look talented. I think they're only going to get better from here on out. I definitely have concerns about how well they're going to do long-term, as I said. Are they really going to be able to keep that consistent performance where they're beating the likes of the Shock and the Fuel, potentially the Justice, the Gladiators, the Mayhem? There's some good teams in this region, and I think that there is a lot of concern about whether or not they'll be able to keep these performances up consistently when they have a lot of rookie players who've never played at this high level. But Happy has been playing an incredible season so far. Jungwoo and Piggy have looked really good. I think that Dante has been, at the best we've arguably ever seen him, and so the Houston Outlaws have really shown up in ways that have been really beneficial to this team, and I think that they have looked really, really strong based on the back of really strong coaching and some really strong scouting with signing the likes of Jungwoo and Piggy and even Juby. And so for me, I definitely have questions about this Outlaws team. I have concerns about them, but right now they look really strong, and I think it is finally time that we can say the Houston Outlaws are truly one of the top teams in the Overwatch League. At number 3, I have the Philadelphia Fusion. This team is a lot better than I expected them to be this point in the season. Even before all of their roster changes and weird things going on with them having players that are not able to get to Korea right now because of visa issues and all that stuff, we still have a team that has been really, really good so far with some really strong players that I was kind of expecting very little from. I think that Toby and Hotba have been really, really good, and the synergy we've seen from Hotba and Mono, which was something that we saw really, really, really poorly last season, the two have looked really good together this season, which is a major improvement from where they were a year ago. And then I think that the Carpe Rascal DPS duo have looked really good, and I think that this is a team that will only get better once Funny Astro and EQO and Poco and Shockwave are joining this team. I think when they come in and Christopher comes in and this whole team is together once and for all, I really do expect this team to just get better. But right now, they are still really strong. They were arguably one team fight away from being the team that made it to the May Melee, right? A mistake was made. I think a bad composition on Volskaya Industries really cost them that series, but they've looked really, really strong. I think Carpe is at peak form right now. They have enabled him to succeed. Everyone looks to be in their best shape, and I think this is a team that really you cannot write off. They are going to continue to be strong. They are going to continue to be good, and I cannot wait to see more of this Fusion roster going forward. In the number 2 spot, I have the May Melee runner-ups, the Shanghai Dragons. They had a bit of a rocky start to their season, yes. They struggled against the Chengdu Hunters. They had a tough series against the Hangzhou Spark, but they really bounced back when it mattered. Huge win over the NYXL, getting that 3-2 win over the Philadelphia Fusion, and then making their way, close years with the Mayhem, close years with the Fuel, pushing their way through to the May Melee Finals. And while they were not able to pull out a win in that final match, they still looked very, very strong while doing it. I have had my concerns with this team, but I knew that they were not done after a single loss to the Chengdu Hunters. I thought people were underestimating them severely going into this tournament. They were my pick to win the tournament, and while I was not correct, they did not end up pulling off the tournament victory. I do think they still looked very strong. There's definitely been some changes with Fate over Fearless. They definitely don't look as strong as they have in the past, but this is a team that will continue to improve. They'll continue to get better, and I think they are still, in my opinion, the team to beat in the APAC region. They are the champions of the APAC region as far as I can tell. So will they be able to pull off the miracle and finally end that 0-40 stigma and finally be champions of the Overwatch League? We shall see, but as things stand right now, they are close, oh so close to the top, but they're not quite there. Finally, at number 1, no surprise to anybody, it is the Dallas Fuel. They've been very, very good. Yes, they had a rough stage. They had losses to the Houston Outlaws and to the Washington Justice. Some two good teams, two very good teams. But they have also managed to beat the San Francisco Shock in a 3-0, and beat the Houston Outlaws in a 3-0, and beat the Shanghai Dragons twice, and beat the Chengdu Hunters. The Dallas Fuel looked really, really good. Fearless looks really, really good. Everybody on this team looks really, really good. They've added Pine, who knows how good Pine's going to be at this point in time. The Dallas Fuel look to be in top shape. They look to be a really strong team. They don't care what the meta is. It doesn't matter if they couldn't play McCree. They still won anyway. Their roster's that strong. Sparkle's Tracer has been better than anybody would have ever imagined. And so despite all of these challenges that this team has faced so far this season, they stand atop after the May Melee as the best team in the Overwatch League. I'll be interested to see if they can keep that up as time goes on. But as things stand right now, they are the Kings. So that is it for my rankings. I'll throw them up real quick. If you want to see the entire ranking as it is, you'll see my tier breaks in there as well, just to give you all kind of an idea of where I kind of rank these teams personally, how I kind of see them in terms of like the gaps and where I think the kind of groupings are. That's just for you all to see and for me as well, but I figured I would let you in on where my mind is at for this one. But that is it for today. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more like it in the future. Comment down below your thoughts on these rankings. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Whatever you want to say, let me know. I would love to hear from you, but that is all for me. So I'm going to get out of here. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.